Hi, my name is Brennan Anderson with Pyramind Studios, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite scores of all time, Final Fantasy VII. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of an analysis on some of the music in the game and some of the techniques that the composer used to make it flow the way it does and how it fits in with the other music in the game, and try and get a sense of some of what's going on here in the music without getting too far into the theory realm. But we're going to be focusing on orchestration, arrangement, pacing, and stuff like that. One cool thing about the rhythm of this piece is that it is in 4/4, but it is using triplets all over the place. The main rhythms are all based on triplets. First, let's start taking a listen from the beginning. So first it starts off just a very, subtle one string section, playing a note and then rising up, and then you start adding all these other elements. And the elements that it's adding are actually really important and indicative of what the game's story is going to be. If you know anything about Final Fantasy VII, there's a bunch of big mysterious stuff going on, a lot of mysterious figures who you don't know quite how it all adds up until the very end. So that's already being reflected here in the music when you have the glockenspiels come in and play this little melody line. Another cool thing that he's doing here is he's using hi-hats. I think in this mix they're panned left. He's using hi-hats to kind of give you the feeling of some sort of industrial machinery stuff that's going on. And that's another big theme in this world, is machinery, and how that interacts with the planet and how all the characters interact with all this machinery. Some really big themes there that he's already introducing into the score at around 15 seconds, and that's pretty cool. So let's continue from there. All right, so that's already another point of interest right here at around 40 seconds. You have this big swell and this big hit with this new melody that comes in with strings and brass and percussion. And it's a very simple melody. Ba, 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 ba. But what's interesting is that it acts kind of like an overture. And I think we're going to be getting into this theme a lot in any game analysis we do, because in my experience and in my opinion, writing a game score is a lot like writing an opera. You have all these different locations and characters and themes and these elements that come and weave themselves in and out of the score based on the action that's going on screen, and it's more similar to an opera than it is to a movie or another kind of stage play. And one big part of an opera is that you have an overture. You have a piece of music that states a bunch of the themes that you're going to be using throughout the opera, and that's what he's doing here. He's using this very simple theme to not forebode, but kind of hint at some of the main themes that are going to be happening throughout the game. This one melody line shares tonal commonalities with the main theme of the game, which you hear, well, not until like an hour later, but it still shares very strong themes with it. It also shares a lot with the overworld theme when when you have your airship and you're flying around the sky. It's called the High Wind Takes the Skies. It shares some commonalities with that. So he's already thinking about what are we going to be hearing the rest of the game and what's important for the player to be ready for. I think that's just really cool. So right there, that little chunk, right starting at about 48 seconds, right here. You have the timpanis, bum, 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 bum. That's doing a similar thing to what the main melody that's playing on top of it and right before it's doing. It's getting the player ready for some other common elements that they're going to be hearing through the game. The timpani in particular is letting us know some of the tones that we can expect here in some of the battle scenes. So the very next piece of music that we hear that's actually a continuation of this opening, as well as several of the battle themes and several of the other kind of intense pieces of music, use timpani in the same way. Very rhythmic accents that are just... it's just a common theme throughout some of the most intense parts of the game. So he's already introducing that as well. He's just using this time to get it all out of the way, saying, this is what you're going to hear, get used to it, it's going to be awesome. So let's move on. So that part was really cool, starting at around 55 seconds, where it's been building up, this theme's been building up, and then all of a sudden it feels like it's reached a climax, but then it keeps going. But how it keeps going, it shifts into a minor key, or a minor mode, and it extends on the idea, but it falls down in this minor tone. And that's really cool because it prepares you again for kind of later in the game, and actually it sets the scene for the whole tone of the game in general. The whole tone is very dark, so it's already saying, hey, you're not about to have a happy time. You're gonna have a good time. It's a great game, but you're not gonna be like really you're going to be feeling all these different emotions for the characters. You're going to be feeling sympathetic and sadness and anger and angst and all that, but you're not going to feel like a ton of happiness right now. So it's getting you prepared for that. And then it goes into this really cool transition here, starting at about a minute and 8 seconds, where it brings in some cymbal hits. Basically what they do is they mimic the sound of a train. He does that because visually in the scene there is a train you can see coming in. So let's listen to this next section right here. Alright, there's a lot to unpack just in that little part. So it is still a part of the same piece of music, but it's transitioning from an intro piece into, now this is a new scene. We started overhead, this big logo, and then it kind of zooms down and focuses. And then not only does it focus visually on this one scene that's happening, but also the orchestra, it's all the strings and brass, but then it goes down into, okay, we're just going to focus on piano and percussion a little bit right here. And so you have all these low ostinatos in the low piano, and it becomes this really cool groove. I wouldn't say that the ostinatos are a theme. I think that they help kind of get you ready for a theme, but the theme of this piece doesn't come until a little bit later. But the ostinatos definitely, even though they're melodic, they become the groove of the piece. And what's interesting is that he repeats it several times here, and he's not doing a whole lot in that amount of time. He's repeating the same thing a couple times. I think it's like 8 measures. The ostinatos go for 2 each, so he's doing it like 4 times or something like that. And the only change that there is that there are some timpanis, the kind of some of the timpanis that we heard before. He's bringing them back in a new way, and he's doing these hits, bum bum, bum 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 bum, But he's keeping everything else the same. The timpanis are the only thing that's changing. And he's doing this for several reasons, I think. He is being very aware of listener fatigue already in two very distinct ways. There are two types of listener fatigue mainly. There's the type where you hear the same thing over and over and over again, and you get really tired of hearing it. That's probably the most common type that you'll hear people talk about. But another type of listener fatigue that you do also have to be really wary about is if too many things are changing at the same time. Or not at the same time, if too many things are changing too rapidly. So you might think, oh, I'm being really clever. I don't want people to hear the same thing over and over again. So every bar, every 2 bars, I'm going to change something and do these dramatic shifts. And they'll never get tired of it. Well, they will, because even though you're not making them hear the same thing over and over again, you are you're not letting them get the music. You're not letting them get into the groove. Groove has a very important part, especially in game music, where a listener wants to feel comfortable and at home and able to explore their space. And if the music is changing too rapidly, then they won't be able to do that. Whereas if the music isn't changing enough, then it'll feel monotonous. So Nobuo does a really good job here of extending the time to let you really absorb this ostinato, get into the groove of the music, but change it up just enough so that you're not bored with it repeating 4 times. So this little kind of stab right here. So it's introducing the orchestra, and it's doing it in a really cool way because it's getting you ready. Everything, keep going back to, I've already said it 10 times, but it's going to keep happening, and it happens all over the place. It's getting you ready for something. It's making the listener anticipate that something new is about to happen. Even though these hits and stabs are new, they're not the main point of what you're about to listen to. So it's introducing something to you that you're not supposed to necessarily immediately pick up on and think, oh, that's important. I should have paid attention to that. If you are ever thinking you should have been paying attention to something, then that thing wasn't introduced in the right way. So this is introducing something that lets you know, oh, wow, something is going to happen, and I need to be paying attention to it. So I'm going to get ready to pay attention to it. And that's the function of this kind of little transitionary or transition stinger here. So this is where the actual first theme of the music comes in. And it's, like I said, it shares similarities to that stinger that we just heard. It's ba 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 ba, and it does that all over the place throughout the entire piece of music. And it becomes super important. It distincts itself. It's distinct from the groove. And it becomes sort of a subgroove, but it's also a thematic element in the horns, and then it allows the strings and the other horn sections to really develop on top of it. But it's really the basis of what's going on here. And so, but it's cool that we don't have to think about it. We don't have to pay attention, because the way it was transitioned into was so brilliantly done that our brain is already primed for it. So it's really easy to listen to. And then one other thing that you want to listen to. So in this new section, it feels like a really big change. And it is a really big change. One of the reasons it feels like that is because the piano groove that we've become so accustomed to, that has changed as well. It's still playing the same groove, but it's been transposed up. And so when you have that tonal shift, it gets away from the initial groove, but still feels like the same groove. And so that on top of, a new theme being introduced, you have a new section, and it feels completely separate, even though it has a lot of same elements. So those little flute runs are cool because it's actually not introducing anything new. If you go back here to about 130, or a little before that, it's the exact same notes. It's just repeated over and over again. And what's cool is that he's able to reuse something, but in a completely new way. It sounds completely new, even though it's not, because it's not being used anymore as a transition element. It's being used as not a motif or a theme. It is kind of being used as a transition element because it is transitioning to the next section, but it's more being used as a melody, a supporting melody, melodic content. And another thing it's doing is that it is adding some intensity to the music, as if it weren't already intense enough. It just wanted you to know, hey, there's another thing that's just making this more intense. Even if you're not adding volume, you can still add intensity through new instruments, and flute's a great instrument to use to do that.
If you're a music producer, subscribe to our channel and stay up to date on the latest Pyramind tutorial videos, track breakdowns, elite sessions, and more. Visit us at pyramind.com.